Those who continue to defend anthropogenic climate change after exposing hockey stick graph have no right to be called scientists. Their titles and ranks are worthless if they cannot see that the causes of modern climate change have nothing to do with CO2. There are hundreds of thousands of times more normal scientists and sane people, but they keep quiet because scientists who dare to speak the truth are silenced. Their articles are not published. They are deprived of scientific titles, fires, and some of them even beaten half to death. The real heroes are those who openly state that anthropogenic climate change is a lie. It is our duty to support such scientists and convey truthful information to the public. In preparation for international conferences and global crisis forums, volunteers of the Creative Society Project have interviewed dozens of honest scientists from around the world. These include climatologists, meteorologists, atmospheric physicists, astrophysicists, geologists, geophysicists, oceanologists. These are representatives of the scientific community of the USA, Great Britain, Australia, Germany, Norway, Czech Republic, Belarus, Ukraine, Russia, and other countries. You can see these interviews on the Creative Society website. In the communication with scientists, we have deeply investigated the arguments, checked ourselves all the facts and evidence that CO2 does not affect climate change. If you want to study this issue as much as we did, the interviews on the website will be useful to you. And I'll tell you the most obvious facts right now. Carbon dioxide, it's a trace component. Its concentration in the atmosphere are negligible. According to official data, CO2 concentration are now 419 ppm. What does this mean? ppm, parts per million, is 1 millionth part in the volume unit of air. How to imagine it? It means 4 CO2 molecules for every 10,000 other molecules in the atmosphere. These are 4 molecules that's supposed to trap and transfer heat to the other 10,000 molecules. Look at them. How will they hit the other molecules? There is no way. It is clear, even to a first grader. How much of the CO2 did humans produce? The amount of carbon dioxide emitted by humankind since 1750 during the entire industrial era is estimated by various researchers to be from 1% to 12% of all CO2, that is, humans have added from 4 to 48 molecules per million other molecules of the atmosphere of the entire time. The degree of absurdity is increasing, isn't it? You don't believe that humans emit so little? Look at the facts. The most obvious proof is the killing curve, the curve of increasing CO2 concentrations. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit the whole world in 2020, business shut down, people stayed home under quarantine, and the air in cities cleared of exhausted fumes. Do you know what the CO2 growth curve did? It didn't flinch. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere continued to rise just as it did before. All the rest of the CO2 is not produced by humans, but by natural sources, such as plants, forest fires, volcanic eruptions, and the oceans. Plants start emitting more CO2 than they absorb. Wildfires increase, volcanic activity increases, and the ocean heats up at the bottom. About 95% of the Earth's total carbon dioxide is dissolved in the ocean's deep waters. The oceans is what control the amount of CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere. Only incompetent experts would argue that the oceans is warming because of the CO2 released by humans. The ocean transfers heat up to the atmosphere, not vice versa. It's simple, high school physics. Instrumental measurements show that the ocean waters are warmed first, and only after 11-12 months, the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere increases. CO2 emissions are the consequence, not the cause of heating. Undoubtedly, the main greenhouse gas is water vapor, which evaporates from the surface of the world ocean. Its contribution to the greenhouse effect is 5 times greater than that of anthropogenic CO2. Now, water vapor is rising because of the intense heating of the deep layers of the ocean, and we'll talk about it later in the forum. Look at the screen. This cube is how much CO2 is released into the atmosphere by humans. The other orange cubes are the CO2 emitted from natural sources. The purple cubes are water vapor. The blue and green cubes are the rest of the atmosphere. The cube examples should be clear, even to a 3-year-old child. It gets even more interesting. It is well known to climatologists that an increase in the concentration of greenhouse gases in the stratosphere at an altitude of 20 to 50 kilometers leads not to a warming, but to cooling of the atmosphere. This is called stratospheric cooling. That is, the CO2 supposedly hits the lower layers of the atmosphere and it cools the upper layers. Such a selective gas. Do you want more news? There are many scientific papers on how anthropogenic CO2 over the Arctic and Antarctica doesn't hit the air but cools it. Isn't it interesting that CO2 not only acts differently depending on how high above the Earth it is, but also depending on geographic location? CO2 has also acted capriciously over the past centuries. It raises the temperature and then lowered it down, but we have to believe that it is exactly the cause of climate change right now. And you know, there is another fact that has come as shock to me. In ice cores from the last 100,000 years of the pre-industrial era, when there was no cars and factories yet, CO2 concentrations were much higher than today's for 100 ppm. For example, it was from 700 to 5,500 ppm. However, in 1985, when the climate anthropogenic hysteria began, these data began to disappear from the articles to make it convenient to fit the results of anthropogenic scam. We are not against CO2. It is indeed rising right now, but it's just not affecting the climate in any way. CO2 increases intensely every time there is a period of global climate disasters, which happens once 12,000 years, and ice core remembers it. That's why for those liars who made up hockey stick graphs who are willing to kill 8 billion people for the sake of money needs to falsify the studies of glacier cores as well. Now, because of this corrupted Judas, the mouths of honest scientists are being shut, and we are losing precious time. Millions of people are dying. The number of climate refugees is growing. For 40 years, they continue to lie to us that we humans are to blame for global warming. We are forced to reduce our already negligible concentrations of CO2 and led to believe that this should keep us from dying. Had anything improved with climate? Every day that the world lives under the guise of anthropogenic CO2, there is another day that brings us, the whole world, closer to the abyss. We should have been studying the real causes of climate change by now and looking for solutions. But billions of dollars keep going the drain of the CO2 myth. The time will come, and we, people, will ask everyone where and why this money was unreasonably spent. Why was our money wasted on air? And who will bring back the lives of people who died in disasters? The theory of anthropogenic climate change is scientific nonsense. That's why we don't care about it. We talk about the real causes of climate change and geodynamics because we stand for lives of everyone on the planet, everybody's life, even those corrupted Judas. Because we are people and we want to live.